Some of the most valuable data that we can get in making our start-sit decisions is actually going to be coming from week one pick'ems, from real projections. And honestly, these are going to be more valuable than what I could come out here and tell you out on my own. If I had to come up with a projection for every single player this weekend, it would be very tough. And at the same time, it may not mean that much. Because if you say, oh, Mason, you're an idiot, you think that Cam Akers is going to have 55.5 rushing yards, well, I'm going to go through and I'm going to say that he's going to have more than that. You can't take me up on it. I mean, I really have no risk on that front. Whereas if we go through and look at these pick'ems on Underdog Fantasy, that's not the case. If they put out a bad pick'em, they will be getting crushed. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and I want to dive in to what we have with these pick'ems this next season, and in particular, what we have with them in week one. Because week one is right around the corner. We need to make some start-sit decisions. And as we do this, ladies and gentlemen, please, if you have not done so already, go down there, drop a like on this live stream, subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. And if you want to check out any of these pick'ems on Underdog Fantasy, it is not too late. You can still find that link in the live chat, in the description, in the comment section. Now is the best time to get on Underdog. They have a site-wide special that you can find Saquon Barkley more than less than half a total yard for Sunday night's game against the Dallas Cowboys. And on top of that, ladies and gentlemen, if you use promo code FLOCK, you're going to get an additional special pick'em more than less than half a passing yard against the New York Jets for Josh Allen. And on top of that, you'll have an additional mystery special pick'em if you are a new member of Underdog Fantasy. Never seen them have three all in the same week, so please make sure you're taking advantage while you still can. But let's go ahead and let's go game by game here and look at some reasonable expectations. And let's see if this can dictate both our starting lineup decisions. And also, I'm going to be going through and figuring out if we have any of these pick'ems that I want to be taking the other side of. I mean, we have a Jahan Dotson one that I think we have to be taking the more than. We have a Justin Fields one that y'all are going to hate me on. But yeah, going through, looking at Higgins, looking at Chase, these guys are must-start players. If you're looking at Boyd, Irv Smith Jr., expectations super low. I think it's a clear spot to be staying away from them. Jared says not seeing the Allen pick'em. So the Saquon one will be available for you right now, whereas the Josh Allen one's going to be showing up on Sunday morning. Since it's only for people who use promo code FLOCK, they're going to have to manually run that. It will be live on Sunday morning for you. Going over to Watson, must-start guy. They have him for 18.5 fantasy points. You see the rushing and passing volume. Nick Chubb, we know he's a starter, 94.5 total yards. Actually, one of the highest marks of any players this week. Amari, definitely viewing him as that high-end wide receiver too. David Njoku, they only have at 3.5 receptions, which I know a lot of people are going to say, okay, well, let's take more than 3. No, honestly, I think that there will be better pick'ems that we can be looking at later on. I would stay away from the David Njoku one. However, going down a little bit further, I just want to be kind of skipping past these defensive players. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I have no interest on that whatsoever. Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, this is where our first disagreement's going to be, where I'm going to be going with the fewer than 51.5 rushing yards for Rachaad White this week. With Rachaad White, this is a running back that is going to be in a very bad game environment, where right now the Minnesota Vikings are currently going to be 6-point favorites over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where we can assume that the Vikings are winning the majority of this game, and ultimately you shouldn't really expect that we get a ton of rushing volume from the Bucs in the second half. Not to mention that with Rachaad White, he profiles to be more so a receiving down back regardless. And if you look at Las Vegas expected points totals, you actually have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers projected to be a bottom 5 offense this week overall. Now, if you're going to go through and look at what we had from Rachaad White last season, this is a running back that obviously it's almost unfair to look at his game log and say, oh, okay, well, yeah, let's go through and let's project this going forward. I mean, this is a running back that had to deal with Leonard Fournette last year, where he's not going to have to deal with that again this season. But if you go to last year and look at how many games Rachaad White had with more than 50 rushing yards, can y'all please let me know in the live chat what you are thinking? How many games do you think Rachaad White had last year with more than 3 rushing yards? The man played pretty much every single game. Napdown says he likes the 19.5 receiving yards. Yeah, we're going to stay away from that. I'm not saying to go and take the fewer than 19.5. Not saying to take the fewer 74.5. Really game environment thing that I expect that Rachaad White doesn't see a lot of rushing volume. But Streamco coming out saying he had 3 games last season with 50 rushing yards. Keep in mind, Fournette did see an injury last year. So I'm going to expect that the rushing volume is going to be a little bit lower, just given the overall game environment that you have for Tampa and the prototype that Rachaad White is as well. I think both Chris Godwin as well as Mike Evans will be must-start players this next week. I mean, like we were saying, I think that this will be a game where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they do look to go out there and they look to throw the ball consistently. Don't care about their tight ends, don't care about their defensive players. When we're looking at Minnesota, I mean, Cousins, we know we have a lot of passing volume. We don't have much rushing. Not exciting. Madison, I don't really care about looking at his fantasy points. I mean, I don't really care looking at KJ Osborne either. We can go ahead and scroll past this. Now, the Houston Texans are interesting. I mean, I really don't feel comfortable enough to say, oh, okay, yeah, the passing volume is going to go in this direction, not the other. You don't have John Mechie this week. Maybe that makes you excited about someone like Dalton Schultz. In reality, with the Houston Texans, it's going to be a bottom, I want to say 3 offense of the week. The only offense that's supposed to be worse this next week will be the Arizona Cardinals. So I'm going to look to stay away from Houston if we can. Looking at Baltimore, they're supposed to crush. Lamar's at 22 fantasy points. Dobbins is up at 58.5 rushing yards. I mean, with Dobbins, obviously, you're looking for the touchdown upside just based off how many points this Baltimore Ravens offense should score overall. But moving on beyond this just a bit, I do want to point out a couple different interesting things. 1, Brandon Ayuk's only at 49.5 receiving yards. 2, George Kittle is only at 6.75 overall fantasy points. And then if we go over to the Pittsburgh side of things, Najee Harris is only at 10 fantasy points. Deontay Johnson is only at 9.75. George Pickens, they only have at 42.5 receiving yards. I'm honestly going to be staying away from all these pick'ems. I just want to point this out and saying, yeah, expectations are that this 49ers and Pittsburgh game is a very low-scoring contest dominated by defense, while we can still clearly start some guys like Deebo Samuel, like CMC, obviously. At the end of the day, the other options in this game, if we can have a better place to go, let's do it. Let's do it. You know, by no means are they players that you have to stay away from, but I'm definitely looking at it. ETN, I mean, hell, he only is at 59.5 rushing yards. So similar mark to Rachaad White, just to give a quick little baseline of why I really like going with the fewer than 51.5 with White. You have Calvin Ridley at 62.5 receiving yards. We know he's a must-start guy. Kirk, not too, I don't know, with Christian Kirk. I think that, I mean, I really want to see if he's in 2 wide receiver sets. Let's get by the defensive guys. One thing I want to point out is they have Deion Jackson at 63.5 total yards. Earlier in the week, I was very much worried about Deion, but now I think that he's going to be a little bit more appealing, just given the fact that at the end of the day, you have no Zach Moss in this game, so he's going to be getting a slight bump overall. Now, with that being said, let's get past the defensive players. I mean, nobody in Carolina is exciting in the slightest. You have Miles Sanders at 74.5 total yards. He's a 3-down running back. You're going to be starting him almost regardless, but please don't look at any of these receivers. Jonathan Mingo, Adam Thielen only had 40.5 receiving yards. These are guys that are going to be clear stayaways. If Desmond Ridder about 200 passing yards, really we're not too excited about starting Ridder. Bijan, must-start guy, 88.5 total yards. What's very interesting is if you look at the fantasy points that they have and the overall yardage total for Tyler Algier versus some of these receiving options, they have Algier for 41.5 yards. They have London at 52.5, and they have Kyle Pitts at 36.5. I don't know how run-heavy they expect this Atlanta Falcons offense to actually be, but it is a spot where it's really, really tough to go through and rely on the pass catchers here. Now, this is one of my favorite parlay pick'ems. I shouldn't probably say parlay, but nonetheless, what I really like doing with these pick'ems is I like putting a couple of them together inside the same game and kind of telling a story. The story that I'm going to be telling here is that the Washington Commanders go up against a tanking Arizona Cardinals team, and we see them easily be able to move the ball down the field against a defense that doesn't care. We're going to go Sam Howell, more than 211.5 passing yards, now that you have Terry McLaurin good to go this week. Now, with Terry McLaurin, obviously he will negatively impact what we are going to be getting when it comes to Jahan Dotson. But with that being said, they only have Jahan Dotson at 43.5 receiving yards. So even if I'm saying that Dotson now is not as exciting of a start because Terry McLaurin is going to be back in this offense, with that being said, I really do think that he can have more than 3.5 receptions. I think he can have more than 40 receiving yards. I think his pick'em is actually interesting on Underdog, but it is another reminder saying, okay, you probably should be looking to pivot to another wide receiver if you can over Dotson based off McLaurin coming back. Don't really care about this Tennessee game. I mean, with New Orleans, we can point out Jamal looks like a must-start guy. I mean, they have him at 65.5 total yards. Would be interested possibly in the more than 9 fantasy points here. Chris Olave, we know he's a must-start guy. I mean, there's nothing to really discuss. With Michael Thomas, they currently have him at 3.5 receptions. They have him at 41.5 receiving yards. With Thomas, I really want to wait until we actually see him on the field before we were to go through and decide that we actually want to start him. Like the last time we saw him produce, it was literally 2019. It was before COVID. I mean, Juwan Johnson looks okay if you really need a desperate start. Obviously, all tight ends this week look really gross with the injuries at the very top. Now, going over to Miami, Raheem Mostert, 82.5 total yards. Looks like a must-start guy at this point. I ranked him too low. I'm going to be the first person to admit that. Raheem Mostert should have been higher in my rankings, and I want you to start Raheem Mostert this week in fantasy. Tyreek, gonna crush. Waddle, gonna crush. This is gonna be one of the highest scoring games of the week. You want to start the starting running back in Miami. You want to start their top 2 wide receivers. And the similar thing that we are going to see when we're going over to the Los Angeles Chargers here. You want to start, obviously, their quarterback, obviously, their starting running back, and obviously, their receivers here as well. It's just going to be a phenomenal game environment where there's going to be so much production to go around. Jacobs at 91.5 total yards, must-start guy. Adams, 73.5 total yards, must-start guy. Nothing to really discuss there. Now, going over to Denver, this is very interesting. And that if you're looking at the Denver Broncos, looks like Judy may be playing now. Javante's going to be on a snap count. They still have Javante at 16.5 total yards. Looks like it'll be a 3-man running back by committee, but they do have Samaje Perine in here for a considerable amount of work as well. And they have Mims at 41.5 receiving yards and Dolchich at 31.5. The second that we get news that Jerry Jeudy's officially playing, please run over and see if you can take the fewer than 41.5 receiving yards with Marvin Mims. Typically, it takes Underdog like 10 minutes to take the pick'em down and make the adjustment. Make sure if you get that alert, the first thing you do is go and see if you can get a Marvin Mims lower in there. But we're waiting until we get the Jerry Jeudy confirmation. We know we're starting pretty much everybody in Philadelphia. We're starting nobody but Ramondre in New England. Going over to Green Bay, this is my other pick'em that I do like that I know y'all are going to hate me with here. Now, I still think Justin Fields will be a great option from a fantasy football perspective. I want to stand by that. Now, a couple different side notes. Jaden Reed's down here at 36.5 receiving yards. Romeo Doubs down here at 41.5 receiving yards. Luke Musgrave's at 27.5. Don't start any of these guys, okay? Please, for the love of God, do not start any of these players. But on the other end of this, looking at the Chicago Bears and looking at Justin Fields. Justin Fields currently is at 183.5 passing yards, 58.5 rushing yards, 15.5 completions, which is where I'm going to take the fewer than. His line is still 20 fantasy points this week. So he's still going to score a lot of fantasy points, right? We saw it last year, and I think we're about to see the same thing this year. Now, I'm not going to say that you're going to have a 1-for-1 season this year as you had last year with Fields, but if you go over and see what we had from Justin Fields last year, Justin Fields last season, if we're going to look at his passing attempts and compare it to the 25.5, he had 2 games all of last season with more than 25.5 passing attempts. If you're going to look at his completions, he had 3 games all of last year with 16 or more completions. So what I will personally be looking at is to say that there's not going to be a lot of passing volume in Chicago here. Fields will still crush from a fantasy perspective because he may have 60, 70, 80 rushing yards. But don't expect that you should have a ton of options when it comes to receivers. Like DJ Moore is only at 3.5 receptions. You can go and see if you think DJ Moore is going to have 4 receptions or more, go take the higher then. But I'm going to make sure that we put out the warning saying it seems like a sucker's pick coming to me. Carson, no, this is not pre-recorded. This is live right now. Yes, this is live. Now going down, we have Claypool, Mooney, not startable. Komet, not startable. Really, DJ Moore and Khalil Herbert may be the only startable guys here. Now, if I had space to go through and highlight one more pick'em that I really like, the fewer than 84.5 total yards for Cam Akers. Cam Akers is priced as a workhorse running back here in an offense that will be able to effectively move the ball down the field. I do not believe that to be the case now that they do not have Cooper Kupp. I am very much worried about Cam Akers. And I will say, if you can take the fewer than 84.5 total yards, I honestly regret not highlighting that here. It honestly is probably better than what we had with the fewer than Rachaad White 51.5 rushing yards. Like that to be the expectation for Akers seems so damn aggressive. In Seattle, you're going to start Walker, you're going to start Lockett, you're going to start Metcalf. Don't start JSN. They only have a JSN 32.5 total yards. I would say you don't start these rookies until we actually see them break out. Then at that point, you can pivot towards them. Now, beyond that, we're going to look at the last game. I mean, we're going to have Dak most likely as someone you should start, 17 points. Tony Pollard, super high up. CeeDee Lamb, super high up. Barkley, super high up. And what's most exciting is that Saquon Barkley, more than half a total yard for this Sunday night. So please make sure you are taking advantage of that, ladies and gentlemen. Should be live for everybody on Underdog right now. If you use promo code FLOCK on Underdog, tomorrow morning, you are also going to get the Josh Allen special pick'em, more than less than half a passing yard on top of the Saquon Barkley, more than less than half a total yard. But you need to sign up before tomorrow morning if you want this Josh Allen one. And then also, if you're new to Underdog, you sign up, you get an additional mystery special pick'em. If you use promo code FLOCK, you're going to get all 3 of those, plus a 100% deposit match up to $100, plus our 2023 fantasy football rankings. I've never seen Underdog have 2 special pick'ems the same week, let alone 3. So make sure you're taking advantage while you still can, ladies and gentlemen. But I think that should be it for this live stream. I'm going to stick around, and I'm not going to answer questions on the live stream here. But if you have any questions, drop them in the comment section. I'll stick around and hang out in the comment section for about 30 minutes after this stream ends, answering all your questions. Yeah, drop a like on the stream if you haven't already. I will be live again in about 3 hours, and we're going to be live streaming all Saturday night. I'm going to be live streaming all Sunday morning. I'm going to be live streaming an NFL Red Zone Watch Party Fantasy Football Edition on the channel during the games tomorrow. So please make sure you stick around with me to watch the games. But I really appreciate y'all. I really hope that we get to see you with the live stream later tonight or tomorrow morning.